The visitor log at Rockhaven Sanatoryum, August 1st, 1962, 2:15 p.m. Jane Miller, visiting Gladys Baker. The handwriting was shaky, the signature clearly fake. The nurse at the desk knew exactly who Jane Miller was. Everyone in America knew that face, but she said nothing. Just watched Marilyn Monroe walk down the hall to room 7 to see the mother who'd abandoned her, the mother who'd spent decades locked away, the mother who no longer recognized her own daughter. What happened in that room stayed secret for 40 years, until the nurse, on her deathbed, finally told the story of the confrontation, the tears, the anger, and the 2 words that changed everything. Rockhaven Sanatoryum sat in the hills of Glendale, California, a private mental hospital for women. Quiet, discreet, expensive, the kind of place where wealthy families sent daughters, wives, and mothers they couldn't handle, or didn't want to handle. Gladys Pearl Baker had been a patient there, on and off, since 1953. Before that, she'd bounced between state hospitals, Norwalk, Agnews, Patton, each one worse than the last. But when Marilyn Monroe became famous, when the money started coming in, she'd moved her mother to Rockhaven, a nicer cage, but still a cage. Nurse Margaret Collins had worked at Rockhaven for 15 years. She'd seen everything: women who screamed all night, women who sat silent for weeks, women who talked to people who weren't there, women who'd forgotten they had children, husbands, lives outside those walls. Gladys Baker was one of the quiet ones. She'd sit by the window for hours, staring at nothing. Sometimes she'd talk about a little girl. Norma Jean, she'd say. I had a daughter once, Norma Jean, but she never seemed to remember what happened to that daughter. Never seemed to connect that the famous movie star who paid her bills was the same little girl she'd given away. That Wednesday afternoon in August, Margaret was working the front desk when the woman walked in. Dark sunglasses despite being indoors, silk headscarf, simple dress, trying to be invisible. But Margaret recognized her instantly. You couldn't not recognize Marilyn Monroe, even when she was trying to hide. Can I help you? Margaret asked, keeping her voice neutral. The woman hesitated. I'm here to see Gladys Baker. Your name? Jane Miller. Margaret looked down at the visitor log, watched those famous hands sign a fake name with shaking fingers. The handwriting was almost illegible, like she was trying not to leave a trace. Relationship to the patient? Marilyn paused. Family. Margaret nodded, didn't push. Room 7, down the hall, last door on the left. Visiting hours end at 4. Marilyn stood there for a moment like she was gathering courage, or questioning if she should be there at all. Then she walked down that long hallway, her footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. Margaret watched her go, wondered what would happen when a daughter finally confronted the mother who'd never really been a mother at all. What Margaret didn't know was that Marilyn had been planning this visit for months, maybe years. Every time she'd come before, she'd been Marilyn Monroe, the movie star, bringing gifts, making small talk, pretending everything was fine, pretending she wasn't dying inside every time her mother looked at her without recognition, without love, without anything. But something had changed in Marilyn these past weeks. Something had broken, or maybe something had finally become clear. She was 36 years old, divorced, fired from her last movie, struggling with pills and depression and the crushing weight of being Marilyn Monroe, and she'd realized she had questions that needed answers, even if those answers came from a woman who might not even understand the questions. She'd driven herself that day. No driver, no assistant, no one who could report back to the studio or the press or her psychiatrist. Just her in a borrowed car driving up into the Glendale Hills, rehearsing what she'd say, how she'd finally tell her mother everything she'd been holding for 36 years. Room 7 was at the end of a quiet corridor. Marilyn stood outside the door for a long moment, hand on the handle, heart pounding. Part of her wanted to turn around, leave, never know what might happen if she finally said everything she'd never been allowed to say, but she didn't leave. She opened the door. Gladys Pearl Baker sat by the window, Same spot she sat every day, staring out at the garden. She was 62 years old but looked older. Hair gray, face lined, hands that trembled slightly in her lap. She wore a simple hospital gown, white, shapeless, the kind that strips away identity. "Hello, Mother," Marilyn said quietly. Gladys didn't turn, didn't react at all. Marilyn closed the door behind her, walked to the chair opposite her mother, sat down. "It's me." Norma Jean. Still no reaction. Gladys just stared out the window. "I know you don't always remember me," Marilyn continued, her voice shaking. "I know sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. But I need to talk to you. I need to say things I've never said, and I need you to listen. Even if you don't understand, even if you don't remember tomorrow, I need to say them today." Gladys blinked slowly. Maybe she heard, maybe she didn't. Marilyn took a breath. "I was born Norma Jean Mortensen. You gave me that name. You gave birth to me at Los Angeles County Hospital on June 1st, 1926. Do you remember that?" No answer. "You kept me for a few weeks, maybe a month. Then you gave me to the Bolenders, a foster family, because you couldn't take care of me, because you were working, because you were alone, because you weren't well." Marilyn's voice cracked. "I don't remember those first years. I was too young. But I've been told the stories, how you'd visit sometimes, how you'd promise to take me home, how you'd never keep that promise." Gladys's hands twitched in her lap. "When I was 7, you tried. You took me back. We lived in a house in Hollywood, just you and me. Do you remember that house, Mother?" For the first time, Gladys turned her head slightly, not looking at Marilyn, but no longer looking away. "I thought maybe it would work. Maybe we'd be a real family. But you were already sick. I didn't understand it then. I thought you just didn't want me, that I'd done something wrong, but you were sick. And you got worse." Marilyn wiped her eyes. The tears were coming now. Years of held-back tears. "You'd have episodes. You'd scream at things that weren't there. You'd lock yourself in your room for days. I was 7 years old and I was taking care of you, making you eat, trying to make you better. But I couldn't make you better." Gladys's breathing changed. Shallow. Quick. "Then one day they came and took you away. The men in white coats. You were screaming, fighting them, and I was screaming too, begging them not to take my mother, but they took you anyway, and I never lived with you again." Marilyn leaned forward. "Do you know what happened to me after that? Do you have any idea what my life was like?" Gladys finally turned, looked at her, but her eyes were unfocused, seeing something else, somewhere else. "I was passed around. 12 different homes, 12 different families. Some were kind, most weren't, some of them." Marilyn's voice broke completely. "Some of them hurt me. And I had no one to tell, no one to protect me, because my mother was locked away, and I was nobody's child." The room was silent except for Marilyn's crying. "I was 9 years old when a man touched me in ways he shouldn't have. I told the foster mother. She called me a liar, said I was trying to cause trouble. They sent me to an orphanage. Do you understand that, Mother? I was punished for being hurt." Gladys's hands gripped the arms of her chair. Something in her face changed. Recognition, understanding, or just confusion. "I lived in that orphanage for 2 years, then more foster homes. Then at 16, I married a man I barely knew because I had nowhere else to go. Because I was terrified of being alone, of being nobody, of disappearing." Marilyn stood up, paced to the window, looked out at the same garden her mother stared at every day. "And all that time, you were in hospitals, locked away. And I'd visit sometimes, bring you things, pretend everything was fine. But you never remembered me, never asked about my life, never said you were sorry." She turned back to face Gladys. "I need to know something. Did you ever love me? Even a little? Even before you got sick? Was there ever a moment when you looked at me and thought, that's my daughter and I love her? Gladys was rocking slightly now, forward and back, forward and back. Because I loved you, Marilyn whispered. I loved you so much. You were my mother. And I spent my whole life trying to be good enough, trying to be successful enough, trying to be something that would make you proud, that would make you want me. She walked back to the chair, knelt down in front of her mother. I became Marilyn Monroe, the most famous woman in the world. Millions of people know my name. My face is on every magazine. But none of that matters because the one person I wanted to love me never could. Marilyn took her mother's hands, cold, trembling. Yeah, I'm dying inside, Mother. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I take pills just to get through the day. And I'm so tired. I'm so tired of being Marilyn Monroe. I'm so tired of being someone everyone wants but nobody loves. I'm so tired of being alone. Tears were streaming down her face now. I needed you. I needed you my whole life, and you were never there. And I'm so angry. I'm so angry at you for being sick, for leaving me, for never being the mother I needed, for never being able to see me, really see me. Gladys's eyes were moving now, focusing and unfocusing, like she was trying to break through fog. But I'm also sad for you, Marilyn said, her voice gentler now, because you never got to know me. You never got to see what I became, what I survived. You never got to see that the little girl you gave away became someone important, someone who mattered. She squeezed her mother's hands. I wish you could have been there. I wish you could have been well. I wish we could have had a real life together, a real mother and daughter. Gladys's mouth moved, trying to form words, failing. I don't know if you understand anything I'm saying, Marilyn whispered. I don't know if you even know who I am. But I needed to say it. I needed you to hear it, even if you can't respond, even if you forget tomorrow. I needed to finally be honest with you. She stood up, wiped her eyes. I'm going to leave now. And I don't know if I'll come back. I don't know what happens next, but I want you to know something. Despite everything, despite all the pain and the anger and the hurt, you're still my mother. And some part of me will always love you, even if you can't love me back. Marilyn turned toward the door, ready to leave, ready to close this chapter, ready to walk away from the woman who'd never been able to be a mother. Then she heard it, quiet, barely audible, but unmistakable. My girl. Marilyn froze, turned around slowly. Gladys was looking at her, really looking at her, eyes clear for the first time, focused, present. My girl, Gladys said again, her voice rough, uncertain, but the words were clear. Marilyn walked back, knelt down. Mother? Gladys reached out with shaking hands, touched Marilyn's face, gently, like she was touching something precious, something fragile. I see you, Gladys whispered. I see you now. Those 4 words, after 36 years, after a lifetime of invisibility, of not being seen by the one person who should have seen her. Marilyn broke. She laid her head in her mother's lap and sobbed. Not the controlled crying from before, but deep, body-shaking sobs, the kind that come from releasing decades of held pain. And Gladys, for the first time in Marilyn's memory, stroked her daughter's hair, gently, rhythmically, like a mother comforting a child. She didn't say anything else, maybe couldn't say anything else, but for those few minutes she was present, she was there, she was a mother. When Marilyn finally lifted her head, Gladys's eyes were distant again. The moment had passed. The clarity had faded. But it had been real. Marilyn knew it had been real. Thank you, Marilyn whispered. Thank you for seeing me. Even if just for a moment. She kissed her mother's forehead, stood, walked to the door, looked back one more time at the woman who'd given her life but never been able to give her love, until today, until this one moment. Goodbye, Mother. Marilyn said softly. Gladys had turned back to the window, back to staring at the garden, back to wherever her mind went when the present was too hard. Marilyn walked out, down that long hallway, past the nurse's desk, out into the bright California afternoon. Margaret Collins watched her go. The woman who'd entered 2 hours ago looked different from the woman leaving. Something had shifted, changed, broken open, or maybe healed. Margaret couldn't tell which. 4 days later, on August 5th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her home. Barbiturate overdose. Probable suicide. The world mourned. The media speculated. The conspiracy theories started. But Margaret Collins, working the night shift at Rockhaven, heard the news and thought about that Wednesday afternoon, about the woman who'd signed in as Jane Miller, about the shaky handwriting, about the 2 hours behind a closed door. She went to check on Gladys Baker, found her by the window as always. "Gladys," Margaret said gently, "I need to tell you something about Norma Jean." Gladys didn't turn. "She passed away, your daughter, Marilyn Monroe. She died." For a long moment, nothing. Then Gladys spoke. Clear, present, just like she'd been 4 days earlier. "She came to see me. My girl came to see me." "Yes," Margaret said. "She did. I saw her," Gladys whispered. "I really saw her. Before she went away, I saw my girl." Then the clarity faded again. Gladys turned back to the window and never spoke about it again. Margaret kept that story to herself for decades. Professional ethics, patient privacy. But on her own deathbed in 2002, she told her daughter, who told a journalist, who finally shared the story of Marilyn Monroe's last visit to her mother, the confrontation, the tears, the pain, and the moment when a mentally ill mother, for just a few minutes, broke through the fog to truly see her daughter, to give her the one thing she'd always needed: recognition, presence, love. The lesson from that day in August 1962 isn't about forgiveness, isn't about reconciliation. It's about being seen, about needing recognition from the people who gave us life, about carrying pain until we finally speak it, and about the moments of clarity that can come even in the darkest circumstances. Marilyn Monroe died 4 days after that visit. We'll never know if the confrontation with her mother brought her peace or deepened her despair, if those 2 words, "my girl," were enough, or if they came too late. But for a few minutes in room 7 at Rockhaven Sanatoryum, Norma Jean wasn't invisible, wasn't abandoned, wasn't alone. She was seen by her mother, held by her mother, loved by her mother, even if just for a moment. Sometimes that's all we get. One moment of being truly seen by the person we needed to see us most. And sometimes that moment is everything, and sometimes it's not enough. Marilyn left that room different, whether better or worse, we'll never know. But she'd finally said everything she needed to say, and for one brief moment, she'd been heard. If this story moved you, share it with someone who understands the pain of not being seen by someone who should have. Have you ever confronted someone from your past? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more untold stories about the human struggles behind fame's brightest faces.